doing a lot of creative things to try to simulate, what guys experience in a game. And some of it's crazy and some of it's maybe weird and can look gimmicky. But, I think ultimately if your players feel prepared and they feel like it's helping them, that's good enough for me.
You're dialed in to the ABCA's Calls from the Clubhouse podcast, connecting our coaches with some of the best baseball minds in our game. Now here's your host, Jeremy Sheetinger.
We are broadcasting live from the ABCA National Office here in Greensboro, North Carolina, and you're exactly where you're supposed to be, coaches, dialed back into our podcast, and we appreciate each of you listening in with us. Baseball is back in full swing. We have pitchers and catchers reporting back for spring training. We've got junior college, NAI, Division II, Division III schedules all off and rolling. Division I teams hitting the field this weekend, plus the lid on the high school season is about to pop off. It's baseball season, boys. And on behalf of the ABCA, we wish each of you, your coaching staffs, your players, and your families the very best of luck this season. And that's where our Calls from the Clubhouse podcast comes in. It's perfect for Automobile University. I love that. When you're in your car to and from the office or the field, or road trips with your team, recruiting trips, or just grinding away in the office, our episodes are for each of you on your time. And we know you're loving this certified audio gold. It's coming at you each and every week now. Just stay tuned. It keeps coming at you this year as we connect you with some of the very best baseball minds in our game. And helping us do that for you guys are our great friends over at AstroTurf, a company that has been ahead of the curve for over 50 years. And we're proud to have AstroTurf as the proud sponsor of this podcast. So stay tuned, coaches. At the end of this interview, we're going to sit down for a few minutes with Doug White and Aaron Klotz from AstroTurf as they give us a glimpse into some of the tremendous things that AstroTurf is out there doing for our baseball community. Now with this show, we're diving back behind the dish and connecting with Tanner Swanson, assistant coach at the University of Washington, and fresh off his coaching clinic from our ABCA Anaheim convention this past January. Swanee was terrific on stage as he offered our coaches a comprehensive plan to mindful drill progression for effective catcher skill development. It's a long title, but this was packed with interesting parallels, creative drills that are certainly outside the box, but also a real baseline for our coaches to start developing catchers with a focus on achievement over just activity. It was awesome stuff. And the proof is in the pudding there at UW. I mean, he's heading into his 5th season running the Husky catching corps, and already Swanson has helped guide multiple Pac-12 selections. He's had 2 Major League draft picks, including a 3rd rounder, which was the highest drafted catcher in program history. Tremendous baseball info on this show from a tremendous baseball dude, Tanner Swanson, catching coach at the University of Washington. Here's the easy part. Just sit back and enjoy this great episode, coaches. Get your pen and your paper ready. It's a ton of information to digest, but it's all in the spirit of developing our leaders behind the plate. Let's dive right in. Audio gold coming at you right now. And we're back, and what a great line that came from our guest today, his presentation in Anaheim, where he referenced, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. Well, I know for a fact, and knowing Tanner, I'm certainly not the smartest guy on the podcast, so I might be on the wrong call. But we're going to get to him. Tanner Swanson, assistant coach at the University of Washington. Tanner, thanks for being on with us, my man.
Hey, Sheets. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an easy follow-up from Anaheim. I thought you did an outstanding job. I think most coaches did as well. They were blown away by your presentation and what you've done and what you've accomplished there at the University of Washington. And we had a chance to finally meet in person. We had a lot of Twitter relationships that finally came to fruition, but we had a chance to go out to your place this fall and do one of our Barnstormers clinics and had a chance to meet and hear this presentation firsthand. But I think for our listeners, Tanner, if you could, give us a quick background of your path through baseball to getting you to this place you're at right now.
Well, I think no different than a lot of coaches. Pretty average college player that realized that, I wasn't going to continue to play this game and wanted to stick around and, just for the love of the game, be able to do whatever I could to stay in it. And, graduated from Central Washington University, played there for 2 years after transferring from Everett Community College. once I was done at Central, I immediately got into teaching and taught a couple years of high school in Sultan, Washington, a small school, and was helping out with the baseball program there, and started to kind of realize I was being pulled in that direction. In terms of, did I want to continue to teach? Did I enjoy coaching and just trying to figure it out? And eventually ended up accepting a job back at Central Washington in the program in which I graduated. It was a physical education and school health program. Went there as a lecturer. I did that for a year and really dove into the coaching thing more there at the college level, and spent one season at Central as a coach, and received a call from Green River Community College. I just went through a coaching change and accepted a head coaching position there, which is in the NWAC conference here in the Northwest, just south of Seattle. Did that for one season, and at that time I was, like everybody, is trying to get involved and network and meet coaches, and started working the summer camps at the University of Washington, and got to know Coach Meggs and his staff, Jordan Tuig and Greg Moore, and kind of in the right place at the right time. I got some really good advice from, at that time I was working on my master's degree at Seattle University, and Bill Hogan, the athletic director there, was teaching a class, and he knew Greg Moore from their days together at USF, and that's kind of how that relationship started. And I just asked him, I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, what my next move was, and he said, hey, go to the level that you want to coach at. The old school, I think, route of kind of working your way up from junior college to maybe a NAIA school to a Division II school, and kind of that model has faded or is less frequent. If you want to be a Division I coach, you should find any way you can to get in there and do the laundry and set up the field and whatever capacity you can get involved in.
Right.
And there was an opportunity just working through those camps to jump on board at Washington, kind of as a graduate assistant. I was still working on my master's degree at the Seattle U, and so I left a head coaching position at a junior college to kind of do the grunt work and just to get involved at this level, and it ended up being the best decision I ever made, and ascended into the operations role for a brief stint, and Dave Nakama, one of our assistants at the time, took the San Jose State job, and there was an opening, and I was able to slide into the volunteer position, and I've been doing that ever since. I'm in my 5th season.
It's pretty awesome. It's always great to hear a coach break down his path in our game and throughout his career, and you've done an outstanding job. I'll be the first to go on record and say that publicly, man. You've really done a great job. Your staff has done an outstanding job of bringing up that program through the ranks of the Pac-12. But relative to you, Tanner, going out to Anaheim this year, had an opportunity to speak in front of that big crowd in the big arena, and you talked about your presentation, Mindful Drill Progressions for Effective Catcher Skill Development. Now, that is directly out of a book of a teaching guy background. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You can hear that in the way you presented your information, the language that you use. But talk to us about the origins of this presentation. Again, reflecting on who you were, as you referenced him as a former infielder, reference those things through teaching and developing this program that you gave out in Anaheim for our coaches.
Well, I think first and foremost, I thought I could maybe fool everybody by putting a lot of big words in the title, and people would just assume I was smart and knew what I was talking about.
Check. Done.
Really, something that's just really become a passion for me, not only as of late, but I told you briefly about my background in teaching, and so I learned a lot in college about pedagogy and how to develop skill and skill acquisition and things of that nature, not necessarily through the lens of coaching, but really how to develop skills in young kids in a physical education setting. And so that background is always kind of stuck with me, and I think has really helped me as a teacher, which I think, as coaches, that's what we do. That's who we are. And, so I consider myself a teacher, even though I'm not in a traditional classroom. It's, the field is our laboratory, so to speak. And so that's always been a part of how I approach working with players. And, so I jumped into the catchers. I was an infielder as a player. And, when I got to Washington, we needed somebody to work with the catchers. And typically it's the coach with the least experience or the youngest guy on the staff. And,
right.
And that's kind of the nature of the beast. And it's unfortunate because I think we could debate up and down how valuable the position is. But anyhow, I was forced to learn on the fly and acquire as much information as I could. And I think just through trial and error and making a lot of mistakes and being reflective and trying to figure out, better ways to do things and learning from other really, really good coaches. I've had some really outstanding mentors in terms of catching instructors and kind of leaders in the field that have, for whatever reason, embraced me and allowed me to kind of in their circle and allowed me to pick their brain. And so that kind of led to, the presentation in terms of, how do we traditionally do things? And then maybe how can I use my teaching background to kind of, and draw parallels from other sports and other great teachers to maybe try to improve, just the effectiveness and how we develop catchers and how we develop skill and all those sorts of things.
That's outstanding, and you certainly are not fooling anybody, man. You really know what you're doing. You've done a great track record there at Washington, putting some guys through to the Major League Draft, and obviously success you guys have had on the field. In this presentation, and obviously the program itself, it's in your words, a very comprehensive skill development program. We're talking about, coaches, it really envelops so many things: identifying the skills, there's current obstacles, motor learning requirements, stimulating, perceptual motor skill growth. I mean, there's some real language in here that can be a little overwhelming. So if you can you unpack it a little bit, unpack this program and give our coaches a glimpse? And I think it's going to open us up to the rest of the podcast and the conversation of where it goes, of really getting in more detail.
Yeah, you had mentioned we've had some success with some moving catchers on into professional baseball, and I'm not one to take credit for that. I think we've had some really good players, and I've been fortunate, in that process to be able to work with some really good players and learn from them in terms of what they do. And but at the end of the day, it's my job to try to help prepare these guys for whatever's next in their career. And so that alone, knowing that the players that we have in our program or any catcher in the Pac-12 or even Division I baseball, they have a pretty fundamental motor skill set. Otherwise you wouldn't have recruited them. So they do some things well from a physical standpoint. And I've just really started to question, okay, what else is there? What makes an average Pac-12 catcher? What's the difference between him and elite? And typically the tools are really, really similar. So I've started to try to dive in and figure out, okay, well, how can I bridge the gap? How can I kind of stay ahead and continue to push and challenge, the players I have an opportunity to work with to make sure they're continuing to get better. I think one of the major errors, I think, when I first started doing this is I was more concerned about keeping our guys busy, just taking the 20 minutes that you have in a typical practice day to focus solely on individual defense and skill development. It was more about me following the practice plan and going from drill B to drill C to drill D down the list. And I think once I put the clipboard down and focus less on the stopwatch and the practice plan and really started to become more observant on what our guys were doing and what they needed and maybe scrapping the plan altogether and moving on to something that wasn't, part of the script. And I think once I did that, and I really learned that from being around Jason Kelly, our pitching coach, is, I think one of the best in the game. And sometimes people look at that guy and say, hey, he's winging it, or he's coaching on the fly. And I think he's an outstanding teacher and outstanding coach because he has a plan. He knows what he wants to do, but he's paying attention to everything, and he's not caught up in, his clipboard or other things that are distracting him from really paying attention to the details and really observing with intent in terms of what each individual player needs. And I think I really started to evolve when I started taking that approach. And that led me to just thinking a little bit more comprehensive about, okay, not only do we need to improve the motor skills, but what else is involved in terms of transferring to not only, from the drill work to the field. And I think that's ultimately our job is to prepare guys to prepare our players to be good in the games, not good in drills, not good in a practice setting, but how do we transfer those skills into a game, and what really encompasses kind of performance. It's more than just being able to catch, block, and throw. It's how do we perceive information, how do we make decisions, who we are, and then the makeup of the player is really, really important. There's leadership intangibles that I think can be enhanced, and baseball IQ, and the cognitive side in terms of how players learn and how you can best transfer information. So I think there's just a lot that goes into what makes a complete player, and for me that's kind of been my mission is to try to identify those things, and so we've kind of mapped out a plan, and it doesn't mean it's the best plan or the only plan, but it's worked for us, and I think it's helped prepare our guys to step into a competition in a very competitive environment, which is Pac-12 baseball, and feel like they are prepared and ready to compete at their best, and so that's kind of what it is for me and what it's been for us, and so
that's great
in a nutshell.
That's awesome, man. Let's dive right in. I mean, let's jump in head first into this, because there's so many points. And again, I had to go back and rewatch your presentation, and again, listen to feedback and things that stuck out. And I took my own notes, but you made a great comparison. I think it's a great way to kick this off to really open the door into this program. You made a great comparison linking catchers to NFL linebackers, whereas most coaches, old school thought, it's catchers to quarterbacks. And we think about, like you just mentioned, controlling the field, but it's so much more than that. And actually, I want you to go into that conversation that you had with an NFL scout about the importance of instincts, and really break that down of how that conversation went and where that kind of started formulating your thoughts as to where you wanted to go with this program.
Yeah, one of my best friends, Nolan Teasley, is a professional scout with the Seattle Seahawks, and so we talk a lot, obviously, about everything. And at some point, kind of in preparation for the ABCA, and really when I started kind of thinking broader about how we can structure a more comprehensive program to enhance skill and all these other concepts, I just asked him. I said, hey, what are some key characteristics that you look for in middle linebackers? And I've always struggled with the comparison to the quarterback, just because the ball is in the quarterback's hands. He dictates where he throws it, when he throws it. And for me, that more closely resembles, I think, a pitcher than a catcher. I think the catcher has to, perceive information. He has to react and read, what is happening, and ultimately then execute a task. And I think that more closely resembles what a middle linebacker has to do. He has to recognize the flow of the offensive line, or he has to, find the ball and attack it and read and react and those types of things. So I just asked them, I said, what are some key characteristics? And this is assuming, that the physical skills are all equal. Myself alone with great instincts couldn't play middle linebacker. But if all things are equal, what's kind of the separator? And a lot of his responses were more perceptual type skills, and they weren't tied to, the physical aspects of what it takes to play that position. And ultimately I said, okay, what's the number one? What's the you can't play this position without it. And he said instincts, and you can't do much if you can't find the ball. And I think that's really relevant to what catchers experience and what we need enhanced or expressed in catchers that play at the highest level. That's what they do. I think they have great instincts or great intuition. Instincts, intuition. I kind of made a comparison in my presentation, and I think we use the word instincts a lot, and I think we use it the right way. I think when we refer to it, it's with the right intentions, but I think instincts are innate. I think it's something you're born with. I think there's very few things that happen on a baseball field that are instinctual, especially as a catcher. I think instincts tell you to get out of the way of the ball when it's thrown at you.
Right.
When an 84-mile-an-hour slider is buried, instinctually, I don't think it's natural to jump in front of it. So I think that's a learned behavior, and I think most of what happens on a baseball field is learned. And if it's learned, I think it can be trained. And, so again, how do we more effectively train to transfer skill to a game? And I think as coaches, this isn't a new concept. We talk about making our training more game-like. That's something that all coaches, I think, strive for. So really, how do we do that is kind of how I've landed at this place where, we're doing a lot of creative things to try to simulate, what guys experience in a game, and some of it's crazy and some of it's maybe weird and can look gimmicky, but I think ultimately if your players feel prepared and they feel like it's helping them, that's good enough for me.
Well, right into that same framework, you made a great quote on stage from your head football coach there, Chris Peterson at UW. Great quote. I mean, it's really stuck with me. You can't coach a kid who doesn't do what you tell him to do, but you also can't coach a kid who only does what you tell him to do. And that kind of goes right back to this instincts and intuition and making things game-like. What'd that quote mean to you? Where do you run with that?
I think it really resonated with me because I think it's really applicable to a lot of players, that whether it's a generational thing or, I think I sound old when I say players these days, but, I think there's a lot of players that when they show up on your campus, they're so used to being told what to do and when to do it. And I just don't think the game's played that way. I think there's way too many variables. I think it's too unpredictable. I think it's really important that, you provide some structure and you provide the framework that allows, your players to play within a system and to play the style of baseball that you want to play. But I think at the end of the day, within that framework, it's important to give your players freedom, and it's important to allow them to make their own decisions and to think on their feet and to think critically about what's happening. And I think just too often we coach that out of our players. We kind of take the athlete or the athleticism out of the athlete, and if there's so many rules. If A happens, then do B. If B happens, then do C. And I think the game's just tough to play that way. So I think that quote for me really kind of hit the nail on the coffin. You have to give them the framework. You have to have players who obviously do what you ask them to do, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that you can't script, and within the game that happen that you need players to be able to adapt and adjust and make decisions on the fly and use their intuition or their gut or their instincts to make plays. And I think if you think back to the best players you've ever coached, I think those are the characteristics, for me at least, that really stand out. Those are the players that didn't need to be coached on for every variable that might come up throughout the course of a game. They almost become, they rely less on the coaching. Not that they're not coachable.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't need you to tell them how to do everything. They can play freely and adapt and adjust and overcome whatever variables might be thrown at them. And I think that's important, that we not only recruit players like that, but we try to enhance those skills and create an environment that allows them to do those things.
If you're just joining us, coaches, we're sitting down with Tanner Swanson, assistant coach at the University of Washington, reflecting back on his great presentation that he gave out in Anaheim, California at our ABCA convention. And if you see that presentation, whether you watched it in person or you've gone to abcavideos.org, you've clicked into it and checked it out, what you'll see, tremendous content. And the videos are just A++. And I think it's quick to tell, though, and again, your language and the way you're going about things, you're very outside the box on a lot of this stuff. And I mean, we're talking blindfolds, strobe glasses. I mean, you're really diving into an area of stimulating players just completely different working on perceptual skills. And again, I don't think a lot of coaches are thinking this way. They're thinking mundane, standard blocking drills, like you mentioned earlier, from A to B to C to D. And you're really getting outside the box on this. So if you could try to, it's through podcast form, through audio, but try to get into some of those drills and some of the ways that you're utilizing things maybe outside the realm of what we traditionally think we coach catchers and the tools that we might use. Dive into that a little bit and open up our coaches' minds a little bit on where you're at and what you've been doing and having success with.
Yeah, I think the word I think you used there was stimulate. That is probably the most important. Like I mentioned before, we've had some good catchers. Everybody does at this level, and my biggest, I guess, challenge is to try to continue to find ways to challenge them. I think that's where growth happens. When I first started doing this and working with catchers, I had 3 practice plans. It was a blocking, a receiving, and a throwing practice plan, and we'd mix it up daily. But they were traditionally really, really simple drills that our guys could do, with very little focus. It was something that didn't require their full attention. It was your traditional, put you in a preset block position, and I'm going to throw balls, in the dirt that you're going to block. And
right.
It didn't require any perceptual component. There was nothing to read. There was no decisions to make. It was solely a motor function. And again, like I mentioned previously, I just don't think that type of training has very much transferability to a game. And really, in my immaturity, I was doing a lot of those things just to say that we were doing them, that hey, we've worked on blocking. So if we miss a block in a game, it's not my fault. It's, we practice that. Or if we drop a pitch, we work on receiving. And
mm-hmm.
I think when I started to mature and realize that's not what it's about. It's about how do we find ways to help our players get better. And when I started looking through that lens, it was, okay, well, we need to get more creative in what we're doing. We need to create a training environment that more closely resembles what these guys are going to experience in a game. And, so once I started thinking in that realm, we started getting a little bit more complex with what we were doing, because I think the game is really, really complex. I think Nate Trotsky said it on this podcast a few months ago. He said
mm-hmm.
that the biggest problem with the game is that the training is really, really predictable, and the game is not. And I think that's absolutely true. I think he said it best. And so how do we make our training less predictable? And I think you have to do that by adding variability. You got to change the environment. You need to create some chaos. You need to put guys in compromised positions and force them to kind of self-correct and organize their body to execute a task. And I think guys or players in general are so used to doing things one way. You have a lot of players out there who have really good swings but can't hit, and you have kids who throw hard but can't pitch, and you have kids who have really good defensive actions in the infield, but if all things aren't right, if they don't get the right bounce or the posture isn't perfect, then they can't make plays. And so I think that's a result of just a really structured, predictable training environment at the youth levels, and kids maybe playing too many games, which isn't a great environment to acquire skill. Early specialization, I think, plays a role where I think players kind of lack a diverse athletic experience. And so I think a combination of a lot of things have landed us at this place where there's some challenges, I think, from a skill development standpoint that, coaches at all levels, I think, are responsible for trying to correct and, take the skill level of a kid that you have and figure out ways to really stretch it and help better prepare kids for not a showcase or a pro style workout, but kind of the chaos that you experience, when you cross the line and it's time to play.
I love that. And you made a reference, and I want to make sure our coaches get this in terms of really putting them in an environment and letting the player figure out how to organize his body, almost, to figure it out. I could sit there and break it down step by step where this knee should be, where your glute, but man, I'm going to let you figure it out and put you in a position of being compromised and make you figure it out. And I think that's a great approach. And you can tell, again, through the videos, coaches, as you see these doing some great things. And I would guess that once you're outside the drill with the strobe glasses, many of those guys aren't asking you to put those back on, are they?
They actually, believe it or not, they enjoy it.
Do they?
Guys, I think one thing that, our guys show up every day, or I'm talking about our catchers, and they don't know what's next. It's, hey, what do we got? What's Coach Swanee got in store today? And
that's great.
So I think, we have some core fundamental things that we do often, but, I think it's important to change the environment. And I think not that it's always our job to motivate players. I think guys at this level are pretty self-motivated. They want to play in the big leagues and they want to continue to improve. And, but if you're doing the same things over and over and over and you want to really capture their attention, that, sometimes mixing it up a little bit, I think can help with that. They show up and they're excited about getting to work. And
wow, I hope that's motivating for our coaches. I mean, I really do. I hope that they take to that, just that nice little nugget right there, and run with that to change the dynamic between themselves and their players and make them excited to want to come to practice and see what you have in store. Now, this might be a little tough, and if you've watched a presentation, you talk on the complexity continuum and really looking at your drills through basically three categories of closed. There's a mixed in the middle, and on the far right, there's an open, and somewhere in between, having drills that fall in all those categories. And I love the part, before we move on, of the open, just like you mentioned earlier, called chaos. I mean, it's more game-like. But again, looking at that continuum, Tanner, if you could, can you give us, our coaches, just maybe a glimpse of what some of the closed drills might look like, some of the mix, some of the open, and talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the closed is kind of just what it sounds like. It's a closed environment, meaning there's not a lot of variability. It's your basic, bare hand flips. It's your preset blocks. It's your very simple, easy to manipulate. I think as a player, I think it's natural for players to be able to, manipulate drills, and they know what's going to happen. They know the ball's going to bounce here. They can cheat it, they can manipulate it, and you don't have that luxury in a game. So I think those very basic drills, not that they're not important. I think when you're trying to refine a skill, you're really trying to break something down. If you're maybe new to the position, or you're moving somebody to catch for the first time, or you're teaching a young player, I think there's a lot of value there. So not to say that we don't do some of those things. We just try to move along that continuum as fast as we can. So a lot of that is just touch work. So we'll do the bare hand flips and we'll do some of that stuff, but it's a progression, and we try to work to the more complex stuff as fast as we can. I think you've heard of, there's a lot of books and literature on kind of the sweet spot, or the zone of proximal development, or the stretch zone. It's kind of the area where I think growth really takes place, and it's, whatever the percentage range is, whatever parameters you want to put on it. A lot of people say it's between the 50 to 70% kind of success rate, meaning if you can execute a drill at better than a 70% success rate, then it's probably too easy. And if you fail more than 50% of the time, it's probably too hard. So you're looking for that zone, and that's based on being really observant with your players and figuring out exactly where their skill set matches, and trying to then prescribe drills that put them in that zone where it really requires their full attention to be able to execute. But it's not so easy that they can do it without their complete focus. So as we move kind of along that continuum, the mixed is kind of a middle ground where there's some reading and reacting, or some processing involved, but there's still some turbulence or some occasional variability. And then the complex is just what it sounds like, or it's open, meaning the environment is always changing. There's more than one ball, there's more than one speed, there's multiple machines maybe, or multiple arms, and You don't know if it's going to be a catch or a block or a ball in the dirt that we pick to throw, or it more closely resembles kind of the unpredictability that we see in gameplay. So some of that stuff is we use a lot of machines, and one of the biggest criticisms I got from the presentation in Anaheim is, hey, those drills are great, but what if we don't have 7 hack attacks? And
right.
and my rebuttal to that is, hey, you can do that stuff with you got 7 arms, you got pitchers who are rehabbing, or extra guys that are around, or student managers, or your 3 extra catchers who aren't repping. But some of those drills that we do with the hacks is we'll have multiple machines set up, and maybe one's a ball in the dirt and one's a catch, and we put both balls in the base of the machine, and we don't tell them which one comes out, and they have to kind of trust their eyes and organize their body to finish the task. And creating some movement, whether we put them in a push-up position and they have to pop to their feet and then execute that skill, or maybe they're lateral hopping back and forth, and just trying to move their bodies. And I think when we do that, we take the focus away from, the internal, which is where do my knees go, or what knee lands first when I'm blocking laterally. And it now changes the focus to the task itself. And I think that's critical. I think at some point, we talk so much about the process. It's all about the process. We forgot about the outcome. And I think the outcome is really, really important. That's our job. Our job is to block the ball in the dirt. And not only is our job to block the ball in the dirt, our job is to prevent the base runner from being able to advance. So to be able to do that, I have to get the ball to a common position off my body, a common contact point. And I think guys at the highest level, they routinely get the ball to their belly button or to their glove, depending on the length of the hop. And if they truly want to control the ball and reduce the distance that it travels after it contacts you. So if that's the end goal, and we know what the end goal is, and we're thinking in those terms, I think, the body has an amazing ability to kind of organize itself to meet the task. And, so some of these more complex or open drills, because they're moving back and forth, or they're in some kind of compromised position, or there's so many variables that they can't cheat it, the focus shifts from the physical movement itself and more to the outcome, which I think is really, really important. Just a quick example, a parallel that just the other day in the cage with one of our players who's really, really analytical and watches YouTube videos, all night on the swing, and tries to manipulate all these different movement patterns, and is struggling now. And he's in the cage, and he's top spinning balls, and he's hooking balls, and he can't figure it out. And I just took the baseball and I put it on the tee, and I adjusted it a certain way to expose a certain seam. And I said, hey, just hit this seam of the ball, attack this seam of the ball. And he started lasering balls to the back net, and all it did was his focus went away from his slot and his stride foot and his weight shift, and the focus went to, okay, I'm trying to just hit this part of the ball. And he stopped thinking about everything else, and his body organized itself, and he started taking really good swings. And I thought, and I stepped back and looked at him, and he kind of smiled. And so I think players are guilty of this a lot, and coaches even. We overthink it. We're so quick to give so much information, and I think at times it interrupts just the autonomous kind of process of your body being able to just use its athleticism and perform a task and execute a skill. And I think, to a fault, there's so much information available, and it's great. And I think it's a great resource for players and coaches. But at times, if that's what you're thinking about when you're in the box or you're on the rubber, I think you're going to struggle. I think you're thinking about the wrong things. And in those moments, you need to be really clear-minded and focus on whatever the outcome is, whether it's hitting the ball hard or getting the ball to your belly button on a ball in the dirt, whatever the case may be. It's something that's external and away from yourself.
That's outstanding stuff. Thank you for going into detail on that. And I got to follow up. I'm sitting here thinking thinking back to these drills and these videos, and our coaches hopefully check in. They get to see these, but it may be a difficult question to ask. What are some of the players' favorite drills out of the closed, the mixed, the open? Because so many guys will use a different drill and it feels different. They get more out of this one than that one, and the guy next to him may be completely different. But maybe what are some of your drills? Give us an example out of each. And just kind of try to talk through them, but the drill that you really like out of the closed group or the mixed group and the open group.
Probably the closed. We do just some basic roll blocks, which I think kind of helps guys center the ball and learn how to move left to right on balls in the dirt. So I literally just roll balls on the turf, and they wait till it enters kind of the block zone, and then they work or transition to the ground. I really like that just because it promotes kind of getting guys into the right position without, again, physically thinking about whether the knees go forward or back or straight down or inside knee lands first. And I think all those things happen. I think coaches debate those things like exclusively, like there's a right way. And I think if you watch guys at the highest level, their knees go forward sometimes, their knees go back, their knees go straight down. I think it all depends on the ball. So those roll blocks are just a really simple closed drill that our guys like. The mixed is maybe more the two machine, block, no block, where there's only maybe two variables. It's either in the dirt or it's not in the dirt. And then some of the more complex stuff is probably the one I like the best is just an advanced version of that. It's two machines, but one's in the dirt, one's a catch, and we ask the catcher to kind of pop block first, meaning he pops down into a block position, then back up to his feet, and then the ball comes out, one of the balls out of either machine, and he has to read, block or catch. And then we also add, runner verbals in there. So if it's in the air and he gets the runner verbal, it's, he utilizes his footwork to second base. If it's in the dirt and he gets the runner verbal, it now becomes a pick and a throw. So you're just combining, a catch, block, throw, with runner verbals, ball in the dirt, ball not in the dirt, and also forcing them to move prior, with the pop block back to the feet. So kind of a lot going on, but in a nutshell, it's really hard to cheat. It's hard to manipulate it. And I think those types of drills, like I've mentioned previously, have the closest correlation to what guys are asked to do in a game.
You mentioned this earlier, Tanner, and I want to kind of go back to it if we could for a second. Just even how much your approach has changed over the last 5 years, I think just shows growth. And like you said, real growth only comes from really getting outside your comfort zone and maybe thinking differently, approaching it differently. But I think we're interested for our listeners, how has your approach to coaching evolved since you first got into it? Maybe what were some of those mistakes you made that you've really learned from, grown from, and are better because of?
I think like I mentioned previously, it was more for me early about just defending what I was doing. Whether I lacked confidence in my own ability or I was worried about the wrong things. I think when I really started to grow as a teacher and a coach, it was taking a step back and thinking more broader about, okay, is this drill gonna correlate to this player becoming a better receiver or a better blocker or a better thrower, and just being more intentional about, when I come back from the ABC convention and I see these drills that I really liked for no other reason than I thought they were maybe unique or they were cool or I really respected the person who was presenting them, and I'd run back to our guys and all of a sudden, scrap everything we've been doing to that point and implement all these new drills, and they didn't really fit or even reinforce the same things that I was teaching. So just being really mindful about making sure that everything I was doing with our guys had a place and a purpose, and it wasn't completely random, even though at times it may appear that way. But just, again, being really, really intentional about there's a reason for everything that we're doing, and I want to make sure that, I'm doing everything within my power to help prepare these guys for a game, not just to keep them busy. And to do that, I had to become really, really observant to the details and pay close attention about what each player needed individually, and being able to adjust and deviate and scrap my plan altogether at times, and prescribe things that maybe were off the cuff that I wasn't necessarily prepared for in the moment, but was maybe more confident in what I was doing, and can put the clipboard down and just really focus on the player and being able to teach from the moment, not from the clipboard. And so I think just the mistakes early were not doing those things. We're just scripting out a practice plan and just doing it and being kind of caught up in the wrong things, and more focused on keeping our guys busy than making sure they were actually improving.
Truly appreciate the transparency on that. I think we're all guilty of that as charged, especially leaving a convention like ours. But last question, Tanner, I really want to get to is, in your opinion, there's some challenges that are out there for catching coaches, and they're looking at them, they're staring at them every day. It could be a number of different things. But if you could go into what you think maybe are some of those challenges, but also how have you overcome them? What are you using that you could offer to our coaches listening in that they could arm themselves with moving forward?
I think the obvious challenge, and you hear this a lot, or at least I do from high school and summer ball coaches, is that specifically high school coaches, is that these kids are playing on all these different summer teams, and they're missing high school events to attend perfect game showcases and other things, and so I think there's challenges there, but I think in reality, I think high school coaches are more important now than maybe they've ever been, and summer ball coaches are more important now than they've ever been, because for a lot of the reasons I mentioned previously, their early specialization and the amount of games these kids are playing, and they may have advanced physical skills, but I think there's an opportunity to really dive into more deeply and with some of these perceptual skills, and how do we think beyond just the motor skill itself, and how can we help prepare our players to play in the games, to play at the college level, so when they show up on campus, they're more ready to play and contribute. So I think that's one of the key challenges at the youth levels is trying to bridge that gap, and I think there's a lot of responsibility on our youth coaches. There's a lot of really, really good ones who do a good job with those things, but I think their role is more valuable now than ever, or as valuable as it's ever been. I think from our standpoint, at the college level, I think just traditionally there's a lot of challenges with coaching catchers, being maybe the lack of experience in the catching coach, myself being one of those guys, or maybe being thrown the catchers from a former infielder, or somebody who didn't know a lot about the position or has never coached it before. I think that's a challenge. I think the nature of practice sometimes isn't real conducive to skill development in general, but specifically with the catchers, it's typically practices are designed around batting practice and BP, and a majority of the catcher skill development work are done catching bullpens, and which are really important and really valuable, but again, not real conducive to breaking down skill and enhancing skill. So trying to, I guess, get more creative and more intentional about, hey, our catchers are not shagging. I don't allow our guys to shag batting practice. The infielders get fungos and they get to work on their defensive skills during batting practice, but typically the catchers are in the outfield unless you've given them some clear guidelines or expectations on what to do during that time. So our guys don't shag. I give them kind of task cards daily that range from, hey, when you go to defense during batting practice, this player A is doing X, Y, and Z, and player B is doing A, B, and C, and kind of switch that up daily. So guys are doing, whatever I feel like they need to do. And then also sometimes giving them freedom to choose for themselves what they want to work on during batting practice. But we try to allot time within the framework of a traditional practice to get more time devoted to defensive skill development for our catchers. And I think if you're not intentional with that in terms of laying out your routines and here's our drill progressions and teaching guys kind of a system, my goal is to be able to give them that framework so they don't need me. We're so limited in how much time we can spend with our players that if they're only working on their skill in the 2 hours you have with them during the winter months per week, then that's not going to be enough for them to develop at the rate they want to and at the rate you need them to. So I think you need to lay out the framework and teach them progressions and get them really committed to routines, all while also giving them the flexibility to work outside of that and kind of take ownership for their own development. But I think during the framework of practice, I think you have to be mindful about what your catchers are doing and how can we, again, be more strategic or intentional about carving out time for them to work on their craft.
Tanner, and I think any listener would say this, it's very apparent, man, that you have a real plan for what you're doing. It's easy to see why the Husky catching corps has had some success while you guys have been there, and cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your busy day to sit down with us and jump on our Calls from the Clubhouse podcast, share this information. And again, we wish you and the entire staff, Coach Meigs all the way down through, the best of luck this year, and we hope to catch up with you again real soon. Thanks, Tanner.
Thanks, Sheets. Appreciate it.
It is truly a pleasure to sit down and talk through developing catchers with one of the premier teaching professionals in our game. Tanner Swanson, assistant coach at the University of Washington. I mean, wow, just again, I hope you took notes because there were some excellent takeaways from this interview. And if you're really intrigued and you want to see some more, head over to abcavideos.org. You can look at purchasing his video, and I'm telling you, the PowerPoint alone will be worth the price, but the content, the information, the insight is just off the charts, and if you're wanting to grow your catching cord, you might want to look into getting this video. But thanks again for your time, Swanee. We wish you and the Huskies the absolute very best this season. And if we could, coaches, let's take a quick second here and check in with our great friends over at AstroTurf. Sat down with two of their baseball guys. We talked through some of the tremendous things going on there at AstroTurf and how they can help you and your program take your facility to the next level.
Okay, coaches, we're sitting here talking with a couple reps from over at AstroTurf, our proud sponsor of our Calls from the Clubhouse podcast. We're sitting down with the Director of Baseball Operations for the West Coast, Doug White. Doug, thanks for being on the call with us.
Thank you, Sheets. Appreciate it.
And we're also joined by the Director of Baseball Operations on the East Coast. We've got this whole thing covered. Aaron Klotz. Aaron, thanks for being on the call with us.
Glad to be here, Sheets. Thanks for having us.
It's great, man. I'm excited about this because this is a great opportunity, just a quick glimpse into what's going on, all the great things over at AstroTurf. But I'm going to tee this up for both you guys because it doesn't matter if it's an East Coast or West Coast. It's across the country. You guys are dealing with some real baseball people out there, and these are folks that know exactly how AstroTurf can positively enhance their experience on the field and with their programs and their facility. But let's give our listeners a quick glimpse into each of your baseball backgrounds because that's what they want to know. When they pick up the phone and call you guys, they want to talk with someone that's walked in their shoes. So, Doug, if you could, give us a glimpse into your baseball background.
Oh, real quick, I was a college baseball coach at three different community colleges in Kansas. Also was lucky enough to be around a really good group of guys in a collegiate league. And way back in 89 and 90, the Wichita Broncos, where we won 2 consecutive NBC World Series championships. So been a former coach and been there, done that, and now I'm a part of a terrific team.
And Aaron, same question. Give us your baseball background so when guys pick up the phone, they know they're talking to somebody that's lived their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Played 4 years at Adrian College. Was lucky enough to stay on there for 15 years afterwards, coaching obviously college baseball, but also was the defensive coordinator in football world as well at Adrian. And also done some work for the Texas Rangers, Mr. Roger Coryell as an associate scout. So altogether, almost 20 years involved in the game, and also run a youth baseball organization, the Adrian Dirtbags. So know quite a few people from the coaching rings in all circles at all levels.
It's outstanding. And again, guys, the point is when you pick up the phone and call these guys at AstroTurf, they know what you're going through. And what's interesting, and we'll get a little more in depth on this, and Doug, if you could, you've been with AstroTurf for about 4 years and 8 years overall in the turf business, but can you give our listeners just some insight into the growth and reach of this company, especially over the past 50 years there at AstroTurf?
Oh, gosh, we started out in the Houston Astrodome. I believe, they came to us and wanted to put carpet in their dome and play baseball and football. And that was when we first jumped into the carpet for playing surfaces. So, but since '04, AstroTurf came up with a really unique product, the Root Zone product, and then Coach Stevenson actually got us kicked off. The former coach at Wichita State University, he came to us and said, "Hey, we really want something that plays like grass." So we invented a brand new product for baseball, and it has Root Zone technology, which gives a little better ball bounce, more consistent ball bounce, and lowers maintenance costs. But here recently, the problem has been because a lot of coaches are, especially up in the north, even the field we did at OU, they're requesting putting artificial turf on the mound, and we've come up with a couple of different products and a couple of different solutions for that product as well.
Great. And Aaron, same boat, man. You're walking into a situation where ProGrass, as everyone knows you, consumed by AstroTurf. So what's been your impression so far of the great company that's over there at AstroTurf?
It's an amazing operation. It's first class, definitely all the way. From a baseball standpoint, both companies are combining to create an ultimate lineup of turf lines and an ultimate product. And between the two companies, there's almost 200-plus baseball installs, and that's kind of unmatched.
Wow.
Amongst our competitors, that's unmatched. I mean, when you're talking about experience and you're talking about product and you're talking about people, the team that we're putting together by combining with AstroTurf is going to be unmatched.
Well, and I want our coaches to make sure if they're hearing this and they're thinking, man, I really need to pull a trigger, or at least pick up the phone and have a real conversation with either Doug or Aaron. If you could, guys, give your contact information for a coach that's interested in this. They can send them to the website, astroturf.com. That's astroturf.com. But give them your direct line. Doug, go ahead and go first. Give us your contact info.
Absolutely. My number is 316-305-0078, or you can contact me by email at dwight@astroturf.com.
Easy enough. Aaron, same question.
517 area code 902-4453 is my mobile. Call, text, do whatever is convenient. And email is klotz, KLOTZ @astroturf.com.
You got the cell phones right there, coaches. Again, dwight@astroturf.com, klotz@astroturf.com, the website, astroturf.com, where all that information's at. And we really appreciate the time, guys, publicly and out front. We appreciate you guys sponsoring our Calls from Clubhouse podcast. I mean, your support of the ABCA, your contributions to growing the game of baseball. You guys have been a long-time proud partner. We appreciate it, and we also look forward to catching up with you guys real soon. Thanks for being on with us today.
Terrific. Thanks for the love, Chief.
Thank you.
Big thanks to Doug and Aaron for sitting down with us. And again, if you're interested in hearing about how AstroTurf is changing the game, reach out to those guys. Find out for yourself how AstroTurf is staying ahead of the curve. Now let's go through the rundown, coaches. First, we want to make sure you're up to speed on all of our previous shows, but you're also staying up to date on our new releases. There's a few different ways to go about it, and here we go. One way, stay tuned to our website, abca.org. If you click on the Resources tab at the top, Calls from the Clubhouse podcast link will be right there waiting for you. If you click on it, you can scroll through all those great episodes, the content. You can also subscribe to our show if you've got an iPhone or an Android device. We got you covered on both fronts. Every week when a new episode comes out, if you're subscribed, it'll show up on your phone for you. You just pop in your earbuds, you plug it into the car, and you take this content on the road with you. It'll be right there for you. But you can also stay tuned to our Twitter account. It's at ABCA1945. And you'll always see the release of the episode every Tuesday. You can follow us during the week. We'll post some quotes from the podcast and links to hear the show. And again, just keep in mind, guys, this podcast is about connecting you with some of the very best baseball minds in our game. We're going to give you tremendous insight and content. We want you to stay tuned. We want you to dial back in and be on the lookout for those new releases. Now, next Monday, February 20th, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, hashtag ABCA Chat is back. And we hope you're making plans to join us. We're going to be talking about catcher development on the chat. We have coaches from all over the world answering our questions with their insight. And it's a perfect opportunity to network with every coach on our chat, retweet and like all that great coaching information that's flying around. And it's very simple. You search hashtag ABCA Chat on your phone or on your computer, click on Latest at the top, and boom, you're in, you're with us. And we'll post questions every 5 to 10 minutes, and it's a can't-miss opportunity to grow yourself as a coach across all fronts. Hashtag ABCA Chat coming at you again this Monday, February 20th, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we look forward to seeing each of you guys check in with us. Now make sure you're following us on Twitter at ABCA1945. You can find me on there as well at Coach Sheets3, and you can reach out to me directly by email as well, Sheets, SHEETS, at abca.org. Coaches, if you love the episode or there was a quote that really stuck out to you, tweet at us. Let us know. We love engaging with you guys. Feel free to reach out. We've had some great direct messages, tweets, emails that have come through about how much you guys are enjoying the podcast. You love hashtag ABCA Chat, but also we love hearing the things you're doing with your program. There's coaching clinics going around. There's things you're doing with your team that we want to share with coaches that are following us on Twitter. So reach out to us. We love connecting with you guys. And one more thing here is that our hope is if you're listening and you're taking in this baseball knowledge, you're part of what we're doing here at the ABCA. If you're not, guys, you should really think about joining the Baseball Coaches Fraternity, and it's only $45. I can assure you it is the best $45 you will ever spend on your development for your coaching career. We hope you jump on board with us, and if you need more information, head over to our website, abca.org. There's an extensive list of membership benefits, but you're part of the world's largest baseball coaches fraternity. It's all about you, and we hope you join us at the ABCA. Another week, more audio gold. We're coming at you again each and every week, guys. Stay tuned to our show. We're fired up to grow the game along with you. And until next week, coaches, we just ask you keep growing, keep developing. We wish you and your club the very best as we get our seasons off and rolling. Thankful to have baseball back in our lives, guys, but more importantly, we want to say thank you for what you're doing for the game of baseball.